provide security here in Las Vegas. I heard all kinds of sustainable battalions are specifically trained in urban warfare. They are crack fascist troops. They are good at what they do, and they have the technology to see through buildings, see around corners, and it's coming to our country. When they decide that the only way they're going to be able to confiscate the weapons is by force, they will begin by going door to door. You won't be able to walk around on the streets without being questioned or having your ID checked. Any of us are deemed to be vocal opposition to what the government is imposing, to the tyranny, will be shuffled off, either killed, like Hastings was, or shuffled off to an internment camp under some fictitious charge, or maybe no charge, maybe just under investigation. We'll all become criminals in the eyes of this fascist government, which already exists, by the way. This is not, shouldn't be news to anybody that's been paying attention. I'm going to let Melissa take you through some of the highlights of what Sustainable Development Agenda 21 is going to be imposing, not only here but in the world.
Okay. Let me just change the web shot really quick. Okay, I'm sorry I'm hard to see. Here we go, that probably helped a little bit. Okay.
Did you switch to that camera?
Yeah, is that okay?
Good.
Alright. Alright, I hope you can hear me okay. So, we're going to just go over really quick some of the main points for Agenda 21, which are coming off this page, correct?
Go down.
Okay. I'll put a, okay, so here.
There are the highlights.
Okay, so I'm going to read these to you. Sorry, we had some printer problems this week. Okay. So we're talking about the gradual disarmament of all nation states, including the United States, to make the UN military unchangeable. Outlawing all private ownership of firearms to disarm citizens of all nations. Establishment of an international criminal court. Establishment of a global UN police force with all local law enforcement under its control. Imposing draconian regulations on all human activity under the pretext of protecting the environment, destroying all property rights, all property becomes the property of the UN corporate state, forcing relocation of large human populations to create wildlands for UN-designed animal species, UN-designated, my apologies, imposing global carbon taxes on all fuels, a Tobin tax on all financial transactions, and a host of other taxes. Population controls, including many mandatory abortion laws akin to UN approval, or UN approved China's one-child policy, UN supervision of all schools, and bring all education under the jurisdiction of UNESCO. All parents licensed and claim UN protective authority over all children. Promoting paganism, New Age religion, occult, and Luciferianism under the guise of promoting peace, brotherhood, and global ethic. So essentially, basically everything we're seeing now. When you look at the UN police force especially, that's exactly what we're talking about. And as Michael was saying, the sustainable
battalions That's what they're titled. The 757, when the 757th came in here, they were titled the 757th Sustainable Battalion. When I read about the intent to use this joint security venture, these are tests. You get used to seeing foreign troops on your streets, and once you become comfortable with it, it becomes commonplace. I mean, you know,
Incrementalism.
it's incremental. It's just like they incremented into National Guard. They incremented into the National Association of Law Enforcement Officers, which is nothing but nationalizing your law enforcement. You don't have local law enforcement anymore because they're all part of the federal government.
But I looked up a sustainable battalion and I couldn't find it defined anywhere. What exactly is a sustainable battalion?
They'll be multinational, okay?
Okay.
They will be UN forces, whether they're in UN uniform or not, because that's what sustainable development, which is what the title of Agenda 21, anytime you see sustainable, it comes straight out of the UN plan. Sustainable battalions are, by design, by training, unilateral, worldwide troops who are devoted or are going to be devoted to the enforcement of the UN One World Government. And once they become the strategically inserted enforcement, your city council will be impotent. Your county commissions will be impotent. Your state government will be impotent because it will all come under these regions. And apparently, or what it appears, is these 11 regions of FEMA are going to be like like after the Civil War, the military sectors after Civil War. See, there weren't any southern states after the Civil War for a very long time, except in the minds of some Southerners, because they were military sectors. Virginia was military sector number 1 for a long time. The state fairgrounds in all those states had been taken over for the bivouacking of troops and what have you. And those military sectors existed for some time after the Civil War, even though they were giving them mock legislatures and all that for the appearance of a unified America. And it wasn't until all of them redid their charters under the incorporation of the United States Incorporated, which was under the District of Columbia Incorporated. And it wasn't until 1868 when the states agreed to incorporate using their constitutions that they were once again recognized as states by around 1872 or so. Of course, the new states coming in were subjected to that because they entered that way. But we haven't been educated, when I mean historically, and I don't understand. I sometimes wonder if these people who have the power to do these things and manipulate our government, because during the Cleveland, Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, And it was during his administrations that bribery through corporate lobbies and what have you, and it was during his term that it became acceptable. It had happened before. That wasn't new, but it became a basically modus operandi of politicians and what have you. You buy a favor. You donate to huge amounts to their campaign funds, and you were then obligated, and as President McKinley said, we're obligated, and in fact, when he opposed one of the major lobbies, he was reminded that they owed him a favor. So these things were incremented throughout history. It didn't just start yesterday. What we're seeing now is the checkmate. We're seeing accumulation. I didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime, but I predicted it years ago. Over the next few months, we're going to see more and more deployment of American forces overseas. They may even start a war somewhere just to make it happen. At any rate, we'll see more and more deployment of American troops overseas, and we'll see more and more importing of these sustainable battalions. Whether they're called that from another country, it doesn't make any difference. That's what they are. It just so happens that they had the title in the 757th. But anyway, they'll be coming in, and we'll see more and more evidence of their activities. There'll be more assassinations of all opposition to government imposed tyranny. We'll see more of the kicking in the doors of these private businesses, especially in small rural areas where it may be the only source of income for the population, which will force them into the urban areas. The population will be forced into the urban areas, and then the rack 'em and stack 'em design of sustainable development will be further along. People have to understand, this is not new. I got a book here that was written, actually first published this is the full content of the original. It's written by a guy by the name of John Robinson A.M. He wrote Proofs of Conspiracy and published it first time in 1798. He sent a copy of this book to George Washington. How did this man know so much? Well, he was invited into the Illuminati. He was a Freemason. He was a member of many secret societies. He traveled all over Europe. He was a wealthy man. He was considered one of theirs, an insider's view, and he had a change of conscience toward the end of his life. He died in 1805, but before his death, he wrote this book in hopes of warning future generations and of warning some of the powers that be, or some of the politicians and world leaders, that there was a plan to ultimately control the world. Lenin said, I'm jumping ahead, Lenin said in 1910 that the surest way to destroy an existing society was to debauch its currency. John Maynard Keynes, the communist economist, and by the way, we taught Keynes economics, Keynesian economics when I was in school, was how I got on to what he was all about. He said that his form of economics was the euthanasia of free enterprise. And he stated that only one man in a million would understand the incremental destruction of economies. We live today in the last bastion of resistance here in the United States because Americans have refused to be disarmed thus far. Henry Kissinger said in 1995 that they would have been able to, that they were no longer able to be certain of being able to establish the objectives of the UN by the year 2000 because of those stubborn Americans. Because of those stubborn Americans. And this man was one time the Secretary of State of the United States of America. He was also, at one time, an exposed KGB agent. He came to this country through the UN. That was why the Russians wanted the UN to be established on American shores. Rockefeller helped him. It's difficult to understand what these people expect to profit from this, that support these plans of a few super elite. The elitists don't seem to understand that once imposed, they won't be immune. Because the super elite will do just what Hitler did and get rid of anyone who knows where all the skeletons are buried. I refer to the Night of 1,000 Knives, 36 hours. In 36 hours, the Gestapo, his new black shirts, killed, murdered every member of the brown shirts that had put him in power. Drug them out of bars, drug them out of their houses, what have you. They called it Night of 1,000 Knives. But every precept of Hitler, the eugenics program, his super race, all of that is part and parcel to UN Agenda 21. Their eugenics program, and if you don't know what eugenic means, it means depopulation. Just to make sure you understand that. And depending on which one of these elitists you listen to, or whether you go to the mountain, to the guide stones in Georgia, the range of who they want to live on this earth, the population number, ranges from 500,000 or 500 million, excuse me, to, that was Ted Turner's number, which was a little more liberal than other ones, And you wonder, who are the people that are contributing to this? Well, Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, the Bilderbergs. I mean, and you wonder, what do they profit from this? I mean, what legacy are they leaving their children, their children's children? I don't know. Can't fathom. But I'm going to leave you today, and we're not going to do the Ustream anymore because we're singing to the choir for one thing, and we post everything on Bankster Fables that we can get our hands on, that we can vet. So what we're going to do is try to engage people who don't necessarily have any information and people who don't read. But I want to leave you with this thought. I titled it "Courage of Our Forefathers," or of our founders. What I did is I reread Patrick Henry's speech at St. John's Church in 1775, after he was deemed the most wanted man in the colonies because he was a colonel in the Virginia militia that turned away the British troops from confiscating the gunpowder. We must hearken back to the courage of our founding fathers. In the unanimous declaration of the Congress in July 1777, Americans must pay attention to the infringement of our own government upon individual freedom and liberty. Our natural rights coming not from government, but from or province in creation, without which there can be no peace, that our would-be masters claim is their goal for the world. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for limiting intrusions upon liberty through the imposed civil procedures. Americans' repeated appeals have been answered only by repeated oppressive measures and injury. A government whose character is so marked by every act that defines tyranny is unfit to rule a free people. At every attempt to call attention of our leaders to the usurpation of liberty over those they pretend to serve, they legislated further unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. They turn a deaf ear to justice while professing social justice as their objective. They impose outrageous restrictions upon Americans while pledging allegiance to a foreign power of the United Nations and global initiatives that amount to imposing world government that disenfranchises our country and all Americans. They know that the American spirit will by necessity force Americans to hold them as enemies of America. It is the only conclusion any American who values their liberty can draw from the actions by our own government to suppress any oppression to their acts against America and American liberties. As once was the courage of our forefathers, when in the course of human events, good people are forced to defend principles, morals, and values they cherish. It is not radical to do whatever is called for to protect and defend their natural rights to be free of unwarranted oppression and tyranny. And that's my last.
So it's,
That's all right.